Sometimes people will do horrendously horrible things to others. And one of the worst things about it is their total lack of remorse or guilt over their atrocious acts. The following stories are anonymous confessions from people who did evil things to others and have zero shame about it. Enjoy. I will start out by saying that I am an evil motherfucker, and I don't feel bad about my actions at all. I use Craigslist to post very friendly and sensitive sounding advertisements to young women who are in a financial bind. When they get in touch with me, I gently talk to them over a series of emails until I get to the point where I suggest sex for money. I ignore all of the ones who are enthusiastic, even the first-timers, and only go for the girls who are repulsed by the idea but are in dire financial straits. I tell them that it's not really prostitution, that it's just a boyfriend who helps you out, etc., etc. The moment I penetrate them, I tell them that I've just turned them into a whore for the rest of their lives. I love watching the emotional anguish. I do this in a way that seems innocent, like I offhandedly say, "Oh man, I've never actually turned a girl into a prostitute before," in a really excited tone of voice. This avoids them hating me, which is good, because it avoids retribution and makes them turn their loathing in on themselves instead of having a perpetrator to blame. I get off on the huge power trip of psychologically fucking with these innocent girls. After they leave in emotional shambles, I friend the girls under a fake Facebook account. 9 times out of 10, I can discover the girl's real name. My favorite score was a girl who used to post 5 to 10 times a day on Facebook, and immediately after seeing me only posts once or twice a month. She started crying, so I told her she could stop, but she wouldn't be paid. I did this so that she would allow me to continue fucking her while she cried, which is one of my all-time best sexual experiences. In effect, I do the S of S&M for real, not in a controlled consensual environment. I've done this to about 40 to 50 girls, mostly aged 18 to 24. I also use psychological tactics to reduce the price as much as possible, and usually spend around $100 to $150 to do this to each girl. I also videotape the sessions with a hidden camera, and the camera has never been seen. I'm an extremely successful person career-wise. Have a lot of great friends, great relationships. I don't do this when I'm dating. And most people consider me to be an excellent, upstanding member of society. But I sometimes wonder if this psychopathic side of me will end up destroying my life someday. I had been lazy throughout high school and never really tried very hard, but just hard enough to maintain a high B, low A average. Senior year rolls around, and I'm applying to colleges and applying for scholarships and stuff. I speak to our school counselor, who tells me that due to my high ACT score, I would be eligible for a $30,000 scholarship, but only if I was in the top 10% of my class. She prints out the rankings, and it turns out I'm ranked 15 out of 142 students. Fuck me. I talked to her about my options regarding my rank, and she says there's really nothing I can do to move up, as it is too late in my high school career. I accept this, and just figure I will have to take out shitloads of loans for school and end up in debt for years. Christmas break comes and goes, and upon returning to school, one of my classmates isn't there, due to a serious mental breakdown right before school let out for break. She'd always been a little crazy, and I figured the breakdown would happen any day. Anyway, I talked to a couple of people about it, and evidently, one of my friends who used to date her had talked to her, and he said that she would be out of school for several weeks to a few months. The conversation continues, and we get on the subject of how smart she was and how high her class ranking was, almost to the point of her being valedictorian. So I gets me an idea. What if I call her up and take advantage of her state, say a couple of mean things, and maybe convince her to switch schools or drop out or something? Once she's gone, I'll be in the top 10% and be eligible for that fucking scholarship. So I go through with the plan. I call her and tell her that I'm calling as a friend and just wanted to let her know that even though the other students in our class are grateful she's finally gone and glad that they don't have to put up with that crazy bitch's shit for a while, that I'm still there for her. I say I have to go and hang up. She kills herself 2 days later. I got the scholarship. I was dating a girl who had become incredibly dull and boring to me. I decided to dump her, and just before I could get around to doing it, she told me she was pregnant. I was pissed off, but I held my cool and thought about it. I told her to give me a few days to come to terms with it. I don't want kids, and I certainly didn't want to be permanently attached to this vapid girl for life. So after my few days, I came back and told her I'd had to think about things and I'd come to a decision. Now, my girlfriend was a very moralistic person who was totally against abortion as she considered it murder. I told her that I had a family history of severe genetic disorders. Total lie. And that I'd spoken to my physician and he'd advised against me ever having kids. Another lie. She initially wanted to let God handle it so she could keep to her morals. But I wore her down and convinced her to get an abortion, as that'd be the merciful thing to do. The day came, the deed was done, and she came home. That night, I told her I wanted sex, which she obviously couldn't do seeing as she'd just had a procedure that day. I guilted her into letting me fuck her in the ass, which was something she swore she'd never do. After it was done, the next morning I told her I couldn't be with her anymore, as I felt terrible guilt over the abortion, and she just reminded me of it. I was involved in a drunken fling with a woman I don't find particularly attractive at one point a few years ago. She was one of those women who acts slutty at parties, etc., probably out of lack of self-esteem, and has severe personal issues. For the next 2 years, I proceeded to only be nice to her when I was horny, and then basically ignore her after that, being rude and curt with her whenever we spoke. After 2 years of this, she got a clue and decided that she ought to move on, quit dealing with me, and got a boyfriend. This annoyed me, since she was my plaything. Keep in mind, I didn't particularly like this woman or find her attractive. So I got in touch with her, and over a period of a couple of months, went from acting friendly to convincing her I had been a victim of emotional issues during our previous interactions. and that I was better now. I convinced her that I was in love with her. Around this time, she found out that she was pregnant by her boyfriend. I still managed to talk her into leaving him one night when she was over visiting me. She phoned him up while I was sitting on the couch and broke up with him. I got her to have sex with me that night, and the next day told her I felt awful for making her leave her child's father, that I had made a mistake, and that we shouldn't see each other again. He never took her back, and while she at least had a job and some future before all this, now she's a single mother on welfare, living in some shit area of town. To this day, she still tries to talk to me sometimes, since she feels that I'm one of her only real friends. Her life is what I've made it into, and it makes me smile. When I was 19, I began smoking pot, in a bad way, and dropped out. I moved back in with my parents, and a buddy moved in too. We spent that winter getting high and chilling. In February, he invited a girl over named Sam. I fell in love with her, and he was dating someone else, so I figured she was mine. We texted all the time, and Kyle, my friend who moved in, said she really liked me. Sam went back to Colorado for college, and I continued my lust, and she continued hers, or so I thought. An opportunity arose to go to Colorado to pick up a car, and that would put me near her, so I was going to visit. Kyle decided he would come along too. We made it to Fort Collins and hung out with her. And on the second day, I told her my feelings, and she said she liked Kyle. I was like, what the fuck? He's dating someone else. Turns out, he didn't care about the other chick, and they proceeded to hook up while we were there. A day later, I left, and he came with me. When we got back to Atlanta, he was forced to move out by my dad for being lazy, and I happened upon a job and moved out. We maintained a relationship, but I was pissed at him. When my lease ran up, he offered to move into a place with me and split the rent. He was living with a different girl, and she was there too. I needed revenge. I slowly fucked with their relationship. I would bring back in the trash on his days, keep the litter dirty, basically undo all of his chores to piss off his girlfriend. There was rising tension, and they both turned to me for advice. So I gave the worst advice I could. I told Kyle to just be himself because he didn't need her shit, and it was better for him. I told the girl to be less supportive and withhold sex to try to get him to straighten up. One weekend, Kyle left with his friends, and Kayla went somewhere with her friends too. I found Kyle's phone at the apartment, and I began texting his girlfriend and saying that he was cheating on her, but from his phone. She got pissed, and her ex showed up thanks to a MySpace message I sent from her account. They fucked, and he managed to get Kyle's number. He told Kyle all about how they fucked, and he dumped her. She tried to say he cheated too, and she had messages from him, but he just blew her off. I had done it. I got her to cheat on him to dump her, and wreck both of their lives royally. But I wasn't done yet. I had 1 year of college left and told Kyle I'd help him start anew in another city if he wanted to move with me to my new job location, and he agreed. I let him live rent-free with me until he found a job. It took him 2 months, but he got a job in retail and started to pay a bit of rent. And I began to work toward getting him fired. I would call the complaint line and leave complaints about how he kept coming on to me while working. He eventually got fired, and when he came home and told me, I kicked him out for losing his job. He couldn't find another job and began to live on the street. Last I heard, he was using meth and living in a shelter. Rewind to 1992, my freshman year in high school. I'm going to a new private school and wasn't doing too well at making friends. In fact, I was regularly tormented on the bus to school. There was one guy in particular that refused to leave me alone. I'll just cut it short by saying he was extremely antagonistic. At some point in the school year, I got stuck doing a video in history class with this asshole and a few other people. Since we both had the same cameras, we were both in charge of videotaping the assignment. We had to swap the tape back and forth a few times. At the end of the project, he took the tape home and made a final edit to the VHS. We submitted the final product and probably got a crappy grade, I can't remember. This is where it gets interesting. I wanted my original tape back that he had used for editing, and after a few months of harassing him for it, he finally gave me back the tape. I took it home and decided to show the whole family our video. So it was me, my 5-year-old brother, and my parents all sitting around the TV. Pop in the tape and quickly realize this is not the right tape. It opened to someone's basement. We hear someone fidgeting in the background, who then enters the frame, nude, and jacking off. The fucker videotaped himself jacking off. Once we realized what was happening, my mom screamed out in hysterics, hardly able to contain herself. I popped the tape out to spare my little brother, but I immediately realized that I had absolute gold in my hand. The next day I went to school, and the usual antagonism started. I very abruptly told him that he had better back off, that I had something he would never want anyone to see, something that was on the tape he gave me. I wouldn't hesitate to give it to everyone in the school if he didn't back the fuck off. He said I was full of shit and elevated the antagonism. Long story short, I found a girl that hated him equally and gave her the tape. She made a copy and told our entire grade about it. During lunch break, our whole class, about 70 people, gathered in a classroom and played the tape. That day, a legend was born. Dancin' Dansies. The entire school found out. All the parents found out, and an emergency meeting was called to find a way to deal with the situation. Ultimately, the parents and school decided to do nothing, to my great satisfaction. The humiliation I imposed on this loser was so satisfying. I never thought it could feel so good. I hope he still lives with shame today. I made a girl fat, and not by marrying her. Back in 2003, my office got a new secretary and a new manager. The secretary, a thin blonde, was a vile she-devil. She wouldn't do anything the staff asked. Find information, set up calls, get coffee for anyone who wasn't herself. And the manager wouldn't do anything about it. We joked that her job title was Internet Quality Control because she more or less sent personal emails and played on MySpace all day. To which, when she overheard, literally went to the manager in tears. Then one day, I got a rather large jar of candy as a gift, and she just about single-handedly consumed half of it, which pissed me off. Then, later that week, I brought in a dozen donuts, and she ate half of them on her own. Upon putting the facts together, our web designer, editor, and I decided to fuel the fire in something we called Operation Butter Up, where we each in turn brought in a large bag of candy to fill up my jar as fast as she could empty it. In the course of 3 months, she put on 20 pounds. In a year's time, she was unrecognizable, and along with being a crank, she was an idiot and couldn't figure out how she was getting fatter. Several times a week, we provided her sweets and snacks of every kind until her boyfriend dumped her, which was about 8 months into the project, and she had to get a new wardrobe. We lucked out because she was rather stupid, but we had more diabolical measures lined up if she stopped eating the candy. Along the lines of mixing in weight gainer to the non-dairy creamer she was using and things of that nature. That was 2003 and she's still big to this day. Saw her on Facebook and smiled at our handiwork. Still single to this day. And I would like to think that we had something to do with it. This last confession might be the worst thing someone else has ever admittingly done to someone else, and has no remorse whatsoever. You have been warned. It's so evil. It's just one sentence that reads just like this. I gave someone a Nickelback CD. What about you? Have you done something unforgivably evil to someone else? Do you feel remorse for it? Tell me about it by contacting me through any of my social media links. See you next time.